country. We say mix.
Yeah, mix is here again.
Come make we build up the nation's children. We want mix.
Yeah, survey come back again. Improve the life of our children.
Clean water
And healthy living.
Access to light and early learning.
sanitation and proper health care. Employment and literacy everywhere.
Oh, mix. Yeah, mix is here again.
Come make we build up the nation's children. We want mix.
Yeah, survey come back again. Improve the life of our children.
In collaboration with the Government of Belize, Statistical Institute of Belize, and UNICEF.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the audience, our esteemed members of the head table, the panelists who will be with us this morning. I welcome you all very warmly to just the second phase of the first step of the dissemination of the multiple indicator cluster survey 4 of St. Lucia. Yesterday, under the funding agency of UNICEF and the government of St. Lucia, we had a very successful one-day dissemination. And we are hoping that this document, which has been produced by UNICEF, which gives us the confidence with which we will share information in terms of women and children, will generate this morning a little more discussion. And we have our esteemed members of the audience who we are hoping will raise questions and issues. I am particularly happy that we have students in our midst because we see them as the future of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you our esteemed panel. We have with us our UNICEF representative of the United Nations Children Fund for the Eastern Caribbean and Barbados, Mrs. Luing, who is here with us to help share with us the goals of the MICS and what UNICEF has seen as its major philosophy for getting involved in MICS4 for St. Lucia. We also have with us the Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Social Transformation. He's also a graduate of the University of Chicago with a Master's of Public Policy with a focus on social and economic development. We also have with us Ms. Magella Louis, who is a statistician by profession, one with a deep passion for statistics, and she works at the Central Statistical Office. She is also very involved and was the major technical individual in guiding the design of the MICS questionnaire, and she has been involved in the MICS survey from the very initial beginning. Also forming the panel here is Mrs. Dr. Kim Gardner-Sedu, who is a consultant pediatrician and the director of the Child Development Guidance Center. Mrs. Dr. Gardner is here with us to share her points of view as it pertains to the aspects of the MICS that focuses on children. There are also two other members of the panel, which I will bring on later and introduce to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin our questioning session, and we will hold questions because we will have a 30 minutes break where we'll bring on our two other panelists, but we will have questions, and I think we will have questions as the panel will see fit to answer. So as panel members speak, they will indicate whether you can follow through with a question. My first question goes to our UNICEF representative, and that's Kim Sandy Lwin. And Madam Lwin, I'm going to ask you, could you briefly share with us UNICEF underpinning philosophy for conducting the multiple cluster survey and the goals of the MICS4, as it is affectionately known.
Well, thank you very much. As the UN Children's Fund, with the mandate to keep a finger on the pulse of the situation of children around the world, if you look at global data on the UN system products of reports, you will find that the Caribbean data is normally blank. We have a serious gap in information on children's data and status of the situation pertaining to mothers and children, especially in the Caribbean. So one of the things that we are striving to do is make the invisible visible. And there are a lot of issues. We see children around us every day, but as a country, as decision makers, there is very little evidence that is on the table. So it's really about filling gaps in information. And that's the reason why MICS was first designed globally, but also in terms of reporting status on children within the framework of the Millennium Development Goals. So there are quite a few goals that are there for achievement by 2015. And we need the information, the evidence to say this is where the status of children is.
We have in our midst students. Could you just highlight at least 2 of the MDG goals that pertain to them so that they may better appreciate the results of the MICS?
Well, 2 very critical goals for children is the infant mortality rate. Where are we in terms of the survival of children? And there's also a global poverty rate which has food security and nutrition. Where are we in terms of children and nutrition status? There's also a very important role for students in terms of girls' achievement, because globally girls are behind. Caribbean is the other way around in terms of access to education and education. So parity in basic education is one of the other goals that are pertaining to children. But every goal has a child element. All 8 goals has a children's element to it.
Before I move away from you, could you just explain to the audience the reception that UNICEF received from the government of St. Lucia when they were approached to become part of the MICS?
Well, I think we approached quite a few governments, and 2 came forward quite clearly, and that was St. Lucia and Barbados. Trinidad and Tobago had already done 1 MICS in an earlier round, so in this round we had 3 out of 12 governments saying yes, we'll do it. So out of the 3, St. Lucia is the first to have its report out. So congratulations to St. Lucia.
Well, thank you very much. On that note, I'm going to turn to our Deputy Permanent Secretary, and I would like him to share with us why his ministry and what was the role of his ministry in getting the MICS process going.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, let me indicate that the Ministry of Social Transformation, Local Government and Community Empowerment, as the name suggests, is the ministry which finds itself in the vanguard of social development in the country, as well as human development. Okay, and of course, because of this, any such initiatives as the MICS, which would fall squarely in the realm of, the advancement of human development in the country, would be the prime responsibility of the Ministry of Social Transformation. In terms of the role of the ministry, it was fundamentally providing managerial oversight to the process. So one of managerial oversight, and I would say coordination of the efforts of a multiplicity of agencies. As you'd well appreciate, an exercise of this nature cannot be achieved without that level of collaboration. After all, the human condition is multidimensional generally, and when we speak about children and women, there is no exception. So an exercise of this nature would, of necessity, require many stakeholders to collaborate, and the role of the ministry entails to a very large extent the coordination of the efforts of those various stakeholders.
Please share with us some of the ministries that were involved in that process.
Absolutely. In fact, I should never negate to always highlight the input of our various collaborating agencies. But when you talk about social development, almost invariably we are talking about education, health, housing, and in this instance, the ministries of education, health, of course, well, the Central Statistics Office was a collaborating implementing agency, so I did not necessarily highlight them here, but certainly the Ministry of Education, of Health, the Center for Child Development. I can never seem to get the name correct. But the Center for Child Development was on board. Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. I might be leaving some others out, I'm sure. Department of Gender Affairs. We had input from faith-based organizations, CSOs. Yeah, I'm sure as time goes by, I'll remember some others. And
so from all indication, we had a wide cross-section, diverse stakeholders involved in the mix. So I want to now ask Mrs. Louis, you were involved in the process from the very beginning. Many times we fail to appreciate that there is a process before the final product is placed on the table before us. And I did show that there was a final product, which is this document, which is very reader-friendly. I would like you to walk us through, briefly, but not leaving out any of the stages that were involved, and to share with us that clear process which brought us to this end product.
Okay, the role of the statistics department was really to do the technical work, and the whole survey aspect was the role of the survey. But we started first with the compilation of the two committees. There was a steering committee and a technical committee, and their roles. The technical committee dealt with the technical part of it. The steering committee guided the process. And after those committees were formed, then we started off. We had first to design the sample, always with the support of UNICEF, and with UNICEF consultants who came from the beginning of the process towards the end. We had, for instance, at the beginning, we designed the sample and decided on what size survey we were going to do. Then we adapted the questionnaires. The questionnaires were given by UNICEF, but St. Lucia looked at those questionnaires and adapted it to our needs. In doing so, there were certain modules that we did some tweaking, changing of the questions to suit our cultural, our situation in St. Lucia. After the designing of the questionnaires, we did the pilot. And in the pilot, we actually tested, there were 3 questionnaires that came out in the end, that were used in the end. But for the pilot, we tested 4 questionnaires. There was the also questionnaire for women between the ages of 15 and 49, the children's questionnaire for children under 5, and there was also the male questionnaire that we tested for men between the ages of 15 and 49. After the pilot, we got back and we reviewed the work that came out of the pilot, the whole process, plus the information coming out. We sat with the field workers, the enumerators, and the supervisors, and we say, okay, what did you experience in the field? How did the survey go? And we went back to the drawing board, further adapted the questionnaires, so we could have come out with a final questionnaire that would have been used for the main field work. At this time, we decided that we would not continue with the male questionnaire because there were lots of, we're happy to test it, but for the male questionnaire, we needed a man enumerator, a male, so each team needed a male, and there was a little difficulty involved in trying to access men in a household environment. But it is our desire that sometime in the future, we really need to go back and have a look at this question. And then for the final adaptation, we went into the field. We trained first. We selected 4 teams, and each team consisted of a supervisor, an editor, and, well, I should say the driver, not forgetting him. There was a member on the team whose responsibility was to do the anthropometric part of the work. She was the one who actually weighed the children, took the heights, and 4 enumerators. And so we selected those 4 teams. The final sample we had were 100 EDs, 100 clusters, each cluster having 20 households. So there were 2,000 households that were selected throughout the whole island of St. Lucia. So after we trained them, we also trained the data processing staff. They went out into the field, and whilst the field work continued, we started data processing at the same time, data entry. Then when all the work was completed, then we get to another phase where you have data processing, and we have 2 members of staff who are actually trained by UNICEF to do the data processing, and our tables were produced.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a break. After the break, we will continue with the questioning of the panel, and I will bring in Dr. Gardner, who would share her experiences with us. But we will give Mrs. Lee an opportunity to finish speaking on the process that was used.
As an early childhood practitioner, I believe that children have the capacity to maximize their potential, and it takes commitment to make it happen. I am doing my part. You too can play your part.
Take responsibility for creating a child-friendly society. This message brought to you by the Early Childhood Services of the Ministry of Education and Culture.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for remaining with us. We will continue with the questions to the panel, and I will invite Ms. Magellan Louis to continue sharing with us the process that was used.
Okay, after the field work was completed and we did the data entry, then you have the output. The data processing staff went through all the tables, the syntax, produced a set of tables, and it was at this point where we brought the information back to UNICEF, reviewed the tables, brought our technical and steering committees together, and we had to plan now to prepare the reports. Mixed report consultant was identified. Well, we went through a selection process, and we started the report writers working towards disseminating the data, bringing it to and looking at the review process of the data for consultation. That was done in March. Back to the board again, writing, and our final product. That's just a summary.
Could you share with us any major, just highlight any major challenges that your office would have encountered?
I'm going to be honest. I don't think we could really say that we had any major challenge. What we had indeed was a group of persons who worked together. We put a lot into it, and we've gotten to this point. And because of the method that UNICEF does the surveys, where the enumerators worked as teams, it was a little easier on the field work. It resulted in a higher response rate, and together we worked hard, but got to this point.
Could I ask PS to share with us any challenges that his office had in rolling out, and really and truly say to us, how long did it take to get to this final product?
Okay, great. Well, again, as I said, there were many partners involved, but perhaps the main challenge, I would say, was the actual coordination of these efforts. Okay, we must understand that in the public service, although you hear quite often that the public service is overstaffed, but we have a situation in the public service in which there are many tasks to be performed and sometimes a kind of deficit in terms of human resources. Okay, and being able to coordinate the effort and get public servants from various agencies to come together to make the time can be a bit challenging. Okay, of course, as I said, owing to the number of tasks that they perform within the ministries versus the human resource deficits which exist at these ministries. So I would say this was a bit of a challenge, but fortunately, very gratefully, we were able to overcome this challenge very nicely, as Majella has suggested. I think there is also the issue of the sensitization of the public to the need for such exercises as the MICS. Okay, I mean, there have been quite a number of surveys conducted in St. Lucia, especially in recent times. And, you know, after a while, people tend to, you know, get fatigued from being asked questions, and they tend to be a little distrusting, if that's the right word. Okay, they want to know what will this be used for. You know, the questions by nature very personal. You know, there were questions on, you know, sexual and reproductive health. You know, these kinds of questions can be very personal. And so the need to provide proper sensitization of the public, really get the public buy-in, get persons to have the confidence that this exercise is going to result in something fruitful for them was, I think, something of a challenge as well.
Thank you. So I now ask Dr. Gardner, who is involved in a number of assessments, and I think she has been with us. She has joined us at every consultation on the MICS, and her center was involved. Dr. Gardner, share with us your experiences in the field. Speak to us as to whether you see any benefits for the MICS, and then tell us how you think those consultations went.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I think every word that has to do with fantastic in the thesaurus is how I would describe the realization of this data. As a medical practitioner, a public health practitioner in the field, I think the theme of yesterday's consultation, better data, better decisions. I think we have been doing a lot of our work in the field, but without having facts and figures of what we are doing, and then how can we measure progress if we don't know what our baselines are. So I think it's timely, I think it's highly relevant, the information that it is providing. And I think it is the beginning of a new era of public health practicing, and in education, and in all the areas that touch maternal and child health, that we are able to move forward with baselines, and then we can appropriately measure our interventions. I think the stakeholder forum that was held in March was a fantastic experience. It allowed everybody who had an interest in it to be able to come and talk about the data. It gave us confidence in the reliability of the data that is produced in the MICS, and that it is a nationally representative sample and results. And I also think that the dissemination yesterday was also a great experience to bring it to all the persons within the field. So everything has been a good experience to do with the MICS.
Therefore, I will ask Kim Sandy to tell us, how can she visualize St. Lucia using the results of the MICS across the island?
Well, that's the aspiration we have, that the data that's come out will get analyzed. For example, you have confirmation that antenatal care of women, in pregnancy, women are going to antenatal care services. You've got 97% there, very good. On the other hand, you've got a significant low birth weight of about 28%. What's happening there? That needs a little bit of investigation within the health sector You have, for example, a very low safe disposal of children's feces. You have, that means 7 out of every 10 caregivers are not disposing stool of infants, and that has implications for public health, disease outbreaks. So these are things that can be looked at and in more detail. Another example is that you've got, everyone knows that corporal punishment is still very prevalent. It confirms that 68% of children between the ages of 2 to 14 are being violently punished in terms of psychological or physical. But the other statistics, when it breaks it down, this disaggregation of data that's very valuable is that 2 to 4-year-olds have a higher level of being punished violently than the older children. Now, is that discipline, or is that stressed out caregivers who take it out on the small children? So these are issues that deserve a closer look, and the issues of how do we better care for our children is a very valid area. Another surprising bit of information is that we've got a very high level of computer use among women, 91%. That is excellent. On the other hand, you've got about 60% of women not using or having access to regular media, which is reading newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, within that week of the survey. So the little issues that come up, merit closer look. But at the same time, I think St. Lucia can celebrate the confirmation that the children are going to preschool and primary and secondary school, and that you've got very good nutrition, but you have little instances. I think Dr. Gardner's better place to look at the issue of rising obesity among under 5-year-olds. So we really hope that this richness of data will be used.
Definitely, thank you. On that tone, I would ask Dr. Gardner to pick up from here, because there was a news item which spoke about the Food Federation speaking about the concerns for children, obesity. Though we can celebrate, we said, not a high level of malnutrition, but I think you raised that issue of obesity. Speak to us on that, and also I would love you to share some advice for parents and our audience here as to how they can prevent obesity.
Okay. I think the world is facing a different sort of nutrition crisis. Before, we were facing undernutrition or growth stunting as our main issues to do with childhood illness and nutrition. But however, it's gone the other way. We are overnutrition or overfeeding our kids. So pediatric obesity is a significant problem, not only in the developed world, but in the developing world. In St. Lucia, we have seen this trend, but it has been our observation in clinics that pediatric obesity is increasing. In 2006, we looked at our 5-year-olds and 5 and above, and we found about 25% of them had disordered weight. But our next step that we wanted to look at was the under 5. So we have our data here, and it showed that about 6.5% of our children are overweight. That's what the MICS showed. And this is a significant amount and translates into problems in 15 to 20 years to do with hypertension and high cholesterol and high blood sugar problems and so on. Now is the time to act. Obesity is a simple problem. It's calories in and calories out. Calories in is what you consume, and calories out is your activity. What do you do? So in terms of advice for parents, for their children and for themselves, it has to be sort of a family affair. It can't be just only the child, because typically if the child has a problem, the family has a problem. We have to increase our activity. We have to decrease the calories that we eat by making better food choices, eating more fruits, more vegetables, drinking more water. one of our big problems in St. Lucia is our juice consumption. Even though we say we make natural juice or local juice, it's still juice. And we say in pediatrics, eat your juice instead, so eat your fruits and drink more water. I mean, we can talk a long time about this, but there's a...
Yeah, before we go to the next break, thank you, Dr. Gardner. I want our PS to say to us, how does his DPS, to tell us, how would his ministry begin to disseminate this kind of information to the general public?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, let me say that the dissemination of the information provided by MICS will be predicated on basically the sharing of the data, the collective ownership of the data. I think that is the posture that we have assumed from day one in terms of the collaboration of the various stakeholder agencies. We intend to continue with this level of collaboration of stakeholders in the dissemination of the information. And so we're talking about agencies such as the Ministry of Health, of Education, the Ministry of Justice, and while I'm at it, you may consider these. Some of the agencies have actually collaborated all along, our own ministry, local government councils, civil society organizations. You have organizations like the privately owned preschools, government preschools, parent-teachers associations, agencies like CAFRA, the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action, members of parliament, donor agencies, students, the media, the legal fraternity, fathers, very important. Okay, I think the findings of MICS indicate that only about 50% or so fathers are involved in, educational activities with their children, if that's the right statistic. Okay, so even those persons, we have invited the various agencies, for instance, to identify one key message coming out of the study, and we are hoping that for an entire month they would focus activities around that single message, be it violent discipline, as has been alluded to, the issue of obesity, fathers' involvement in the life of the children, inadequate care of children, and so on and so forth. So we are going to do that, the use of jingles and public service announcements, Facebook, Twitter, and social media. I see we're being signaled for a break, so yes, just a synopsis of some of the activities that we intend to.
Yes, thank you very much, DPS. At this point in time, I think I would wish to say thank you to all the panel members here. We will be doing a switch around, and I think Dr. Gardner will need to run because she has another conference which she had planned. So I say thank you very much to you, Dr. Gardner. I am sure our future deliberations, you will form a part of it. Thank you very much. We will take a break.
What kind of life you want?
I want peace, love,
and romance,
and respect.
Respect you.
I want to be able to express myself without fear. It's my right.
I want the same thing too. As a matter of fact, I want men to respect themselves. I would like to see more men be more accountable and responsible as husbands, fathers, lovers.
Respect.
I would like a life where my sister, my daughter, my mother, all women could walk the streets and go to work without harassment.
I want a community that respects differences.
And speaks out against discrimination.
Speaks out against rape.
Child abuse.
Domestic violence. Peace.
Love.
Respect.
A life free of violence. It's our right. Brought to you by the United Nations Development Fund for Women.
Welcome back. We have on our panel joining us is Miss Sistra Simon, who is the education specialist with the Education Development Management Unit of the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS. Welcome. Also joining us is Mr. Nayam Jabatis, who is well known, and he is the director of the HIV and AIDS program. We also have remaining with us our representative for the Eastern Caribbean states, for UNICEF, Kim Sandy Lwin, and we have also remaining with us our Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Social Transformation, Local Government, and Community Development, Mr. Augustus Kade. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let me continue and let me invite Ms. Sistra Simon to share with us the highlights of the MICS survey as it pertains to the national development and the fulfillment of the rights of children.
Thank you, Ms. Anthony, for having me on this program. Well, the multiple indicator cluster survey has provided us with those baselines that are so needed. What it has done, it has provided information that can assist in the development of education. Some of the major highlights coming from the MICS are: one, our children 3 to 5 year olds, and the assessment from the Early Childhood Development Index. And this assessment evaluated our children within 4 domains. And together, our children scored 91.4% of our children are developmentally on track. However, while we have made a lot of gains, even within this general assessment, if it's further broken down, there are some key areas which needs us to pay close attention to. While our children are doing very well physically, there is need, their physical development, there is need for us to focus on their social emotional development, because in this domain, whilst it's not an alarming amount, but it points to the need approximately 87.3% or 87.3% are emotionally on track, so socially and emotionally. However, the concern for us in terms moving towards our national development, it's how our children performed or are assessed, how they are doing in literacy and numeracy. So it leads now to what can we as a country, St. Lucia as a country, now do in terms of its education, strategically, the plans for education. This information provides, like I've said earlier, the baseline data that is needed to plan for the national development, but also the specific targets for education.
Okay, thank you. So you are leading us into policy, and I will ask Mr. Jabatis to speak with us very briefly. The MICS has said something to us with regards to the public's knowledge, especially the women and children, with regards to HIV and AIDS. I need you to just highlight that and also say to me, do you see any indications for the kind of policies that must be put in place?
Oh yes, definitely. Let me take the second part first, because I think it is so important in terms of the policy changes that we need to do with respect to HIV and AIDS. One of the things that came out clear in the MICS is the need for multi-sectoral, multidimensional collaboration. What I mean is that, for example, when you look at the knowledge, in terms of knowledge, you see there is a kind of a cascade. As you go down, as you make the indicator a lot more specific, you find that we're not doing as well as we were doing before. What I mean is, for example, when you look at, when you ask persons about the transmission, you see education coming up as, although education, you see it's more affecting persons who have education, primary or no education. You've seen it's more affecting, you're getting higher proportions among poverty indicators and so. So this tells us that first of all, we need to collaborate with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Transformation, to reach those persons who seem not to have the level of knowledge compared to the rest of the population or of women. So this means that our current program, the way the program exists now, is mainly in the Ministry of Health, but we need now to expand and to go out to some of the other sectors, specifically the ones dealing with education, which will be the Ministry of Education and Poverty, and even urban, rural, and even women who are not married but in union. We're seeing gaps in terms of their vulnerability or their knowledge of HIV and AIDS. So for me, the policy implications of this is very, very important. The other thing that's important, and I think everybody's mentioning, is the gaps in information, the gaps that in information. One of the things we have knowledge indicators are very, very important for us, because we know knowledge, you need knowledge to act decisively. And so we find that a lot of we do not know the magnitude of that in women. We do not know the magnitude of that in most of the population. Most of the indicators that we can report on are the ones that we have routine data for. So this survey data is very, very important for us in terms of future planning for the ministry as well, and also making our programs, targeting our lot more programs to where they need to be.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask Ms. Kim Sandy Lane, our UNICEF representative. UNICEF has continued to be good to countries and invest in the kind of money as it has done in the MICS. Would UNICEF continue to support St. Lucia as it moves towards the dissemination of information? And in which way can UNICEF continue to support St. Lucia as we move towards disseminating this information?
Well, definitely. We're in it from the beginning to the end, including being there in terms of the policy work that needs to be done. In the dissemination, we will first be doing a child-friendly version with the ministry involved. Not that we're doing it, the ministry is doing it. The report itself is a product of the work of the St. Lucia government and its partners, not a UNICEF report. It's totally owned by the country. And so the child-friendly version, leaflets for different audiences, in terms of reaching out and having 2 workshops, one in the north, one in the south, engaging with the academia. Will be one with the media, one with adolescents. So the dissemination is very much planned for the next 6 months or so.
Thank you. Let me ask Deputy PS Kade. Yesterday we heard the messages, or we were being told that there was nothing done for men. Could you help our audience to understand that though the MICS concentrated on women and children, but it also has implication for men's behavior? Share your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm sure perhaps Majella would like to say a little, as she did yesterday, regarding why we were not able to go through the men's component of the MICS survey. So I will kind of leave that out of what I'm going to say. There were difficulties, let me just say that, in terms of actually implementing the men's component. Although we're thinking that perhaps in future we could look at that. But of course, you are right that although the focus of the MICS has been on children and women, it doesn't mean that it has no implications for men at all. Okay, if you talk women and children, you must talk men. All right, because barring maybe, well, no, let me not even say that. Let me say that you require a man to make a child, right? So I don't think you could have children without men, except in cases where you have how do you call it, in vitro fertilization or whatever. That's what I didn't want to get into, right? Yes, but to have a child, there must be a man. So there are implications for men. Okay, the study, for instance, looked at the involvement, the level of involvement of men in the lives, of their children. Okay, and that is important. I mean, as we move forward to formulate policy, to lead interventions, very importantly, to engage stakeholders and so on, we will definitely have to bring men on board. There are strong implications. One of the great things about the mix, as someone alluded to, is that it presents data that is disaggregated to some extent. And we welcome that very much in the Ministry of Social Transformation, because it will allow us to plan much better in terms of not just policy, but also in terms of our interventions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. Simon to speak to us as to how the EDMU can assist in supporting and disseminating among its clients the results of the mix.
I'm very happy for this question, Ms. Anthony, because EDMU, we've begun something over the last 2 years where we bring together, well, I'm sure most of you have heard, we've begun implementation of a new sector strategy, the OESS. And in the implementation of this strategy, we have taken an integrated approach to planning in education. What we are planning to do, we've had discussions, my head, Mr. Albertine, and myself, into sharing of the mix in St. Lucia as one of the best practices. What we are hoping will come out of the mix is that there would be some sort of national plan, a vision, a national plan for St. Lucia, where the data from the mix is used as a baseline, but part of this, it would be a strong monitoring and evaluation component. So therefore, we would have indicators that we would be able to monitor annually, measure our progress. So by the time MICS4 comes around, we would have seen the gains of our interventions based on what has come out of there. So we are really planning on sharing this model as one of the best practices. We are hoping to use the data also to assist us in resource mobilization, in that when you have to go to the funders, you need background, you need data, you need the evidence. So the mix actually complements some of what we knew, but also some of the data that we're actually collecting in our OECS education statistical digest. So it is of great benefit to us, and we do see a role, and we look forward to promoting and sharing of what has taken place in St. Lucia.
Thank you very much. So once more, you are reinforcing that the mix allows us to speak or to write or to seek funding and grants with greater confidence. On that note, I'm going to ask Mr. Nahum Shabatis to share with us one significant message he would advocate from his position to get the message to the young people about HIV and AIDS.
Okay. First of all, your greatest weapon against this is knowledge. So my message to all young people in St. Lucia: learn all that you can to equip yourself to protect yourself from the impact of HIV and AIDS. You also need to use the existing services, and by using, when I say use the existing services, I also mean assist in the planning of those services to make them more appropriate. And finally, after you have used the services and have gained knowledge, act to make the positive changes that you need to make necessary to help you protect yourself against HIV.
So on this break, it is knowledge, but just not knowledge, but using the knowledge and acting on it. We will take a break now, and then when we return, the audience will ask any questions, make any comments that they so desire. We'll go to break.
So,
I went on a date last night. The guy invited me in. I didn't think it was necessary, but then he got upset and then he tried to...
You know how they are. So you better not get yourself into situations where you could become vulnerable.
And you cannot be naive. Always be prepared.
Some of them will knock and knock and knock and...
Some of them will push.
Force.
Some just know what you need to hear.
At the right time.
At the wrong time.
For them.
But I will protect myself.
HIV is deadly. Protect yourself.
The temple of my spirit, the mansion of my soul. Only I can guard it. I am in control.
This message comes from the Ministry of Health's National AIDS Program and the Creole Theatre Workshop.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and we continue our discussion on the results of the MICS and the various implications for the various sections that were highlighted. Let me turn my attention to Kim Sandy, our UNICEF representative. Would you share with us the MICS and the implications of the MICS as it speaks to issues of men?
Well, this time round, the focus was on women and children, mainly because it was the first time it was being done, and bringing in the men's module makes it much more complicated and much more costly. And one of the findings of the MICS points to the confirmation that men need to be far more engaged in child rearing and being there as fathers throughout the process of from birth to the teenage years. And the low involvement of men in that is one of the findings that really point to the fact that for men to be far more engaged, we have to be looking at a paradigm shift in how people relate to children's issues. And this goes up the line to policymakers who are not demanding data on children. So the next time round, and to look at a baseline was mentioned. We need to know where is progress 5 years from the last survey. So that's in 3 years' time. Will there be investment by the government to make sure that there is another round of MICS, or that the MICS indicators are fully incorporated into other surveys that are being done, so that we see progress in the decision makers are primarily men, and this is where we are trying to make sure that the invisible side of children, the invisible side of development, is fully incorporated and given a priority place. And that is seeing that it is not a cost, but an investment in children.
Thank you very much. And I hope we are clearly understanding that though the MICS did not concentrate on men, the MICS has serious information that would help craft policy decisions, or just generally the education of our men in society. Thank you very much, Madam Kim Sandy. Let me ask our Deputy Permanent Secretary, Mr. Augustus Kade, to give us a little more detail on the dissemination of the MICS. Speak to us as to a little more about what can be done.
Thank you. So I spoke already about the engagement of the various stakeholders, the identification of key messages coming out of the study, and basically we intend for every month for the next 5 or so months that we're going to focus on one of these messages with activities and public service announcements and so on. We intend also to utilize the print media quite a bit, use of posters, flyers, stickers, bookmarks, bumper stickers, The electronic and social media, I have alluded to that. Use of text messaging through the telephone, the mobile telephone companies, Facebook, Twitter. More of what we're doing right now, more panel discussions. The MICS report is pregnant with information and suggestions for further research. Okay, let's take obesity for instance. What is driving the obesity? Is it that children are getting such good nutrition, they're eating too much nutritious food, or is it the composition of the diet? Maybe it's one that is high on carbohydrates, and carbohydrates is what gets you fat. Okay, so more research into these things, for instance. Okay,
tell me before you go on.
Yeah.
Can I ask
where
you
to
to
access?
Concentrate a little more on, I'm a school child,
right,
and I want to hear something about the MICS. What is your ministry going to do that will draw my attention? I know you all have a plan in place. Share that plan with us.
Sure. Okay, so we intend to do not just the traditional promotion, but we intend to embark on a child-sensitive kind of promotion. Already, Ms. Lewin has alluded to the production of this child-friendly publication. We intend to formulate poster competitions among schools, children, and so on. Essay competitions that would help them to focus on issues of social protection for children, utilize the findings of the MICS, better acquaint themselves with what's in the MICS report, and so on and so forth. We also intend to disseminate the information via the Government of St. Lucia website. So if anyone is desirous of finding out what is contained in the MICS report, they could access that very shortly from the government portal, www.govt.lc. They could also access that in short order from the UNICEF website as well. In fact, eventually, the actual data sets will be posted on the UNICEF website, which would allow persons to go in there and utilize the data to generate their own tables, for instance, or to do further analysis on the data that would even further inform policy making and programming and so on. Okay, so students could actually be able to access the real data sets, something that is pretty rare, although becoming more popular now. Okay, so that's one. You could also
tell us a little more about the jingle that will call our attention to anything as it pertains to the MICS, because I'm sure I heard that there is a jingle to be produced. Speak to us about that jingle.
Well, yes, you are very correct. We will be producing jingles. As I said, these jingles will speak directly to children as well. So it's not the traditional kind of jingle. Yeah, so we will be embarking on that. And not just the jingle, but with respect to the other aspects of the promotion. We think it's very important that the children, the beneficiaries, the key beneficiaries of this initiative should be deeply involved in the process. So they will be brought on board. The report could also be accessed via the Ministry of Social Transformation, the Central Statistics Office as well, and generally from the other stakeholders, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health. Yeah.
Good, so there will be a lot going on. Mr. Jean-Baptiste, tell us a little more about whether there is sufficient comprehensive knowledge about HIV and AIDS, and could you just zero in on one strategy that your unit can use to bring people's attention to the need for knowledge?
Okay. Well, first of all, what we intend to do, what we'll be doing here on in is we now have a target. Whereas before we did not know what proportion of women had comprehensive knowledge. To me, if we have more than 1/3 of women of childbearing age not having comprehensive knowledge, we need to target that. In terms of specific components of the program, we see women with education, primary education or less, 45% of them don't have comprehensive knowledge. as well as poorer women, 56, more than half of them, and older women, again 56, 57% don't have comprehensive knowledge. So we'd have to look at the components of the comprehensive knowledge, use the mix to set our targets and set our for that, and then design programs. The other thing that is very worrying is that we only had about 13%, about 14% of women having the accepting attitudes, which this is very a component also of comprehensive knowledge. So it's knowing the transmission, but also the accepting attitude. This is very, very, very low. And this, so we will have to target, we need to do some more targeted programs in those areas to try to reduce it, to bring it a little higher than the 65% that we are seeing now.
So once more, you are reinforcing that the mix has brought home in very true manner, or has brought to you the data which is necessary for taking action. I thank you on that, and hope that your department will use the mixed results the way it should be. Now, Ms. Simon, speak to us about support, fathers' support for learning, and the results of the mix, and why it is so critical that fathers should play a part in learning.
Thanks for this question. The findings of the mix reveal that approximately 50.1% of fathers engage in at least 2 or more activities with their preschooler, children within the 3 to 5 age group. This is concerning. As we all are aware, the home is the first place that any child is to be educated. But moreover, let's make the link. Look at the 50% involvement, 1 out of every 2 involved with their child, and based on earlier information shared, the Early Childhood Development Index, it shows that we need to be concerned about our children's social and emotional development. Where we are right now, it's opportune with this baseline data for us to probe more into why are our fathers engaged in little activities with their children. It definitely speaks to a need for improving our parenting practices, but also targeting who are those fathers, who are those children, what sort of household, the context that these children are living in, the wealth index of the family. So definitely a father plays a pivotal role, and I think in our culture, it has been one where mothers always play that leading role in terms of a child's development and education. But I think at the point that we're at in education and development on the whole in St. Lucia, there is an urgent need. This data speaks to an urgent need for men on the whole, and for us to support our males in parenting the development of the young child.
Thank you. I need to ask Ms. Magella Louis to share with us the mixed results when it comes to women acceptance of violence. I think this is one aspect of the mix I do not want us to leave this panel discussion without addressing.
There's one question on the questionnaire which sought to find out women's perception on domestic violence. I will give you an idea of what the response to this question was. 6.5% of the women found that they were accepting to domestic violence, and the whole set, we could break it down by the age group, but what were the results without giving you the figures? Apparently, as the women grew older, they became less accepting towards domestic violence. They didn't think that, and there are various reasons that the women believe that that a man had a reason, a man was justified to beat his wife or partner. The reasons ranged from it goes without telling them that you're going out, if the woman neglects the children, if she argues with her partner, if she refuses to have sex with him, if she burns the food, if she's unfaithful, if she tries to end the relationship, if she spends money irrationally, and then for any of those reasons above. So you find 6.5% of the women found that for any one of those reasons above, the partner had a right or is justified to beat her. But if you look at them ranging from when the women who are 15 to 19 years had a higher percentage of women who felt that way, And as the women grew older, we saw a decline to the percentage of 3.1. So this accepting attitude is higher among younger women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for you to share your comments or to ask questions of the members of the panel. Members of the panel will feel free to respond to the questions. They will all be required, if they feel that they have a point to share with you, to do so. So there is a roving mic. The floor is now open. We have a young student. Thank you. Please say who you are and probably what school you are from.
My name is Kelsey Rene. I am from the Cyrus Simon Secondary School. I am very happy to be here. I thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Could you please tell me what is the way forward now that this important survey has been completed, and what changes do you anticipate?
Members of the panel, what is the way forward now that the mixed results have been published? And what is the second question, sir?
What changes did you anticipate?
And what changes do you anticipate? Who would like to take this question?
Okay, maybe.
Mr. Any more questions? Or we'll take all the questions?
My name is Annabelle Jonge. I'm from the Cyrus Simon Secondary School, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Do you have any suggestions on how we as students can use this information with our peers and family members? Will a deliberate effort be made to familiarize or provide the data to all primary and secondary schools? For example, will a book be sent to all schools?
Thank you very much for those questions. Any other questions? Take the students, answer them, and then open the floor.
My name is Christine Antoine, and I'm from the Cyrus Simon Secondary School. How were the households selected to be part of this survey? It was mentioned that a large percent of 2 to 14-year-olds are disciplined in a violent way. Are there any plans already being made on how to rectify this issue? Are there any suggestions on alternative measures that can be adopted?
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the students? What we will do, we will take the questions from the students, we will respond to them, and then we will open up the floor again. Students? Yes, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brian Paquette. I'm representing the Monroe College. My question to you is that to the panel, seeing that you will have rural communities, and most women in rural communities, some of them have the mindset that if their lover and beat them, that means they don't love them. So what kind of protection or kind of security you would have for them in that aspect of things?
Thank you very much. Okay, our first question from the Sir Ira Secondary School, the way forward, and what kind of anticipation do we have for that? I think that was, yes, so we'll have DPS will answer that question.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for your question. Firstly, let me indicate clearly that, I mean, Ms. Lewin indicated earlier that this is not a UNICEF document, okay? It's a Government of St. Lucia document. But let me in turn now say that this is not a Government of St. Lucia document. This is the people's document, okay? In other words, you know, we all have ownership of this document. It is as much yours as it is that of the Government of St. Lucia. And we intend to make it widely available so that students can utilize it community-based organizations out there can utilize the findings of it in terms of their advocacy work, for instance. There might be a community-based organization that focuses on children, like the Viewfort Children's Aid Society or what. They can access the findings of the MICS and utilize it to advocate on behalf of children. Okay, so again, I want to make this seminal point up front. Okay, now in terms of the way forward, of course, we have spoken a bit about the dissemination plan. And that's critical because it is through a proper dissemination plan that we will make the document available and accessible to the potential users. Okay, it's one thing to create the document or the study, okay, and quite another thing to have people know about it and be able to access it. So this is the first next step, all right? And I have not done justice to the dissemination plan because we are constrained by time here. But you will be hearing a lot about MICS, no doubt, okay? Another aspect of the way forward is what we at the ministry and at the government level will be utilizing the MICS for. I can tell you, for instance, that we are in the throes of a major social protection reform initiative. We're trying to make sure that the monies that government allocates to help, you know, vulnerable groups in St. Lucia, children, you know, women, the poor. We want to make sure that these resources are utilized efficiently, that they do not get leaked out to persons who do not need these resources. And so we are going to utilize the findings of the MICS quite a bit to ensure that in our efforts at reforming social protection in St. Lucia, that we focus in the right areas, on the right areas. And so, for instance, in 2009, an assessment of St. Lucia's social safety nets was undertaken by the ministry with help from the World Bank. And one of the great recommendations coming out of it is the need for us to have a more child and gender sensitive social safety net system. Okay? So the findings of the MICS, for sure, where the Ministry of Social Transformation is concerned, will allow us to focus more purposefully, more deliberately on, you know, certain aspects or certain components of our social protection system. Okay? Monitoring progress, as several speakers have said before, there are the MDG goals, okay, and indicators. And we have not been able to comprehensively report on where we are at with respect to them. Well, the MICS provides us with information that would allow us to assess our progress on no less than 13 of these MDGs. Okay, 13 of them related to health, education, and mortality. Okay, so
eradication of poverty.
Exactly. So we almost immediately will be in a position, or are in a position right now, to update our status on the MDGs. Okay, and budgeting is another very important area. Okay, in an environment of scarcity, you know, the exercise of choice is very important. We need to decide on what we are going to spend money and how we are going to spend money so that we receive the greatest bang for our buck. Okay? And so the findings of the MICS will tell us, okay, you know what? The areas you need to focus on, education, on maybe HIV transmission, on targeting fathers for greater involvement in, you know, these kinds of things. Okay? So just a kind of a very brief account of the way forward, what we're going to do. I hope that is satisfactory.
Yes, and let me just reinforce here that the anticipation is that you, your community, your friends, members of the school will take the report. So I'm therefore answering the second question that yes, copies of the MICS report will be sent to all schools. We are hoping that the teachers and the students would have an opportunity to sit together and discuss it. You have social studies classes, you have civic classes, you have history classes, you have health and family life classes, and it is a good opportunity to use this document We are hoping that secondary school students were involved in writing of SBAs, the formulation of hypothesis for the SBAs to resolve a problem for research, could use the mix to come up with some topics so that they can research it for future use. So it has a thing. You will be getting copies at the schools. All will be sent, and Mr. Frederick is there, and a list will be made as to the various organizations who probably were not there yesterday, but we do recognize we have to disseminate this report to the relevant partners. So I have answered question number 2. I think we have another question, and the correction would have been, Miss, not 2 to 14, but 2 to 4-year-olds were the recipients of the harshest form of indiscipline. Would you like to deal with that, Ms. Simon?
Yes. Yes, the research does point to this, and totally across the island it's 67.5%, with the 2 to 4-year-olds being the highest. First of all, this, like I have said earlier, this information provides us with a baseline. We need to probe further. So here is an opportunity for us to conduct further research to finding out where exactly, which families, we need to target so that we plan interventions that would better meet those children. But it also speaks to parenting, the need for us to have some sort of national parenting, not just after persons have children, but even prior to having children. How we change those, because it's a mindset. How we as a nation move away from punishment to discipline, which is what we really want. And so addressing this violent discipline is a multifaceted approach. It can't be one ministry. It should be all of us, from Joe Public to the policymakers. Now, you as students, you play a role. Even what you do, how you solve your problems. And we see it's linked again directly to the home. And so you have to assist. You're hearing the message. You have to take this information to your colleagues at the school level. And when you see them using those aggressive behaviors, to try to speak with them and stop just blaming them or making excuses for them, but try to get them together and to educate, to create this move, this change from what we see, from punishment to discipline.
Thank you very much. I do not know whether Magella would like to address Brian from Monroe College issue, the question that he raised in the rural community, whether that acceptance of lower status people, what protection can be given to them in terms of the acceptance of the level of violent discipline, and how was the sampling done? Yes. Somebody asked the question. Please answer. How was the household sampling done?
That's it. That was the question.
Yes. Please answer this one, and Liam can probably deal with the second one, the second part of this one.
Okay. The sample design. I must say first, the primary objective of our sample design was to produce statistically reliable estimates for most of the indicators that we're collecting data on. We used the frame of the population census, the 2010 population household census. And what actually happens, we have a listing of the households. The country is divided into enumeration districts, and for every enumeration district, you have the households listed. Then we had a 2-stage sample design. In the first stage, you select a cluster, or what we call an enumeration district. So after the decision was taken, then we knew that we had 100 enumeration districts to select. So that's the first stage where these are selected, and it's done randomly. I wouldn't go into the detail. It's a little, and then the second stage was where we selected the households. So I'm going to put it away that that might be able to help you. You list the households in an ED from 1 to 150, for instance, if that's the number there were. And you know now that we're going to select 20 households from the 150. Or I will use an even simpler number to remove the mystery. If you have an enumeration district with 100 households, and you need to select 20 households, what it means that you have a fraction of 100 divided by 20, that is 5. So you're going to select them randomly with a gap of 5, a systematic gap. You start with the first one, And then if you add on 5, eventually when you get to the end, you would have selected 20 households. I think that's just an easier way of explaining it. So then that way everybody has an equal chance of being selected. You have no biases. And then you don't even know who is going to be in that household. So I'm not going to go into an ED and say, I am going to do my house, or I'm not going to do somebody else's own. They are numbered, and then you select the first household, you add on 5, then you look at the 6th household, you add on 5, the 11th household. It's just because we have a visitation record from the census and we have maps, so the households are properly listed, and we have, so it helps the enumerator when in the field. But it's very random. So everybody has an equal chance of being selected, and then you blow up that data. You use a fraction, you can blow it up to bring it up to the whole when you've gotten all the information at the end. Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Thank you
you
very much. Nahum probably would want to speak briefly on what can be done about protection of women in violent situations.
Yes, I think the first thing that we need to do, because the mix, one of the thing that I found very, very useful in the mix is, apart from giving you what the global proportion is in terms of the problem, it also looks at what we call the broader determinants of any one of the events that it measures. So it looks at the level of education, it looks at things like poverty and so on. So I think we need to look at those broader determinants and then see where the problem is, and then address, try to target programs to reach there. Obviously, we have to use education. Education seems to be one of the things. So in other words, we need to reach the perpetrators of that violence based on what we see, how we see it distributed in the mix, design programs, monitor, evaluate, and implement to see if we could reduce it. Obviously, setting the target load and what it is. I mean, this is broadly what we can do, but that is how I think we as professionals need to look. If we're thinking in terms of programming using the mix, we have to start with what we see broadly happening and then go down to the different what I call the broader determinants. This has implications for not working just with your ministry. It has implications for working with all of the other ministries that we know would have the comparative advantage in dealing with the particular problem that we're talking about. So this is just a general thing that I think we should go. Again, obviously, this is just the first study. We need to go and do further research, you understand, and use our best practices to see how we could make our programs a lot more targeted.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Baptiste. I think I'm being signaled that we have run out of time, but before we close, I think Ola from UNICEF was very instrumental, so I'll definitely have to ask the cameraman to give us a few more minutes. I will ask Ola to ask or to make a few comments, and then I will ask our Deputy Permanent Secretary and our UNICEF representative. Unfortunately, every member of the panel will not be able to give their final comments, but I will ask Ola, DPS, and Sandy to give their brief remarks. Yes.
The MICS survey essentially helps us to answer the question of what is happening, what is the situation of children. And we still need to find out, and all this reference to further research is to now ask ourselves, why are these things happening? Because our interventions have to respond to what is the situation, and also deal with the deeper issues, the social issues, the cultural issues, to find out why they are happening. And it is by focusing on in these two directions that we'll be able to have long-lasting and sustainable solutions to the issues. The other issue that came up is in response to the children's questions, that the plan that we have is also to actually do some videos and put them on YouTube. So like an issue of parent harsh discipline of children, we'll make a small video clip so that you could download it, you could watch it and discuss it with your friends, and pick each of those issues that way. We know it's easier, it's much more effective are communicating with younger people with videos and pictures and images, so that you may not have time to read a 222-page report, but you have time to watch a 5-minute video. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I will now ask DPS to make a few brief closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to thank everyone who attended this panel discussion. I want to encourage you all to utilize this document, utilize the findings of the MICS. We certainly don't have any intentions of making this a dead document. We want it to be a living document. We want its findings to find their way into, you know, first of all, our policies for social development and human development, our programs, into your SBAs, your, school debates, you name it. We are really counting on all and sundry to utilize this finding so that we could increase our investment on this very valuable exercise.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to the best.
Thank you.
Well, I think to pick up on the word investment, it has been an investment of the government of St. Lucia and several UN agencies. UNICEF, UN Women, and UNFPA partnered with the government to fund it. Now it really is, as I said at the opening yesterday, the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is on the table in the public. So please debate it, talk about it, raise those issues in community settings to really translate this into action.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our panelists, and most of all, I'd like to thank you, the studio audience, for being here. Thank you ever so much.
Access to light and early learning,
sanitation and proper health care, employment and literacy.